I'm Jay Abraham. I grow businesses for a living, and I'm a professional teacher and a student.
Thank you for being here.
I'm flattered to be invited.
Well, this has been a long time coming. You're one of my most influential mentors. I've told everyone who's watching this what an impact your work has had on me personally and professionally. So it's a real honor to get to talk to you today.
And I want to reciprocate. It's an honor to be talking with you because it's extraordinary when you see somebody take quality work and use it to touch a lot of people and make people's lives better, richer, happier. So I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Well, I want to first talk about how we got to know each other.
Okay.
Because it is a funny story. And then I'd like to talk about your background.
You're not going to tell the one about the bar?
No, not the one with the tequila shots.
Okay, very good.
I first came across your book, Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got. And I read it. It's a $10, $15 book. And I implemented just some of the material in there.
Okay.
And in 4 weeks, it made me 6 figures. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't just the revenue. It completely changed the way I thought about my business, my clients, my students. Shortly thereafter, I got on your email list and I realized, wow, there's someone who uses bigger words in their copy than I do. And your emails are long. You take all the rules that the online people tell you should do, you completely ignore them, throw them out the window, and you write the most flowery copy I've ever seen, and I loved it. I started reading, and at a certain point you said, I have this course available. I'm going to teach a group of small business owners. You have to fly to California once a month. You get 45 minutes with me on stage. And I said, I'll do anything. And you actually checked my references. I had to apply. It was the first time in years, maybe since college. And I ended up joining the course. And I flew from New York to LA once a month just to talk to you for 45 minutes. Very transformative for me, for my business, and just to be able to experience a truly strategic level of thinking. And so that's the way we met. And now we've become friends. You've mentored me in many different areas. And so I'd like to talk about your background.
Sure.
You know, you're, as you said, you're a teacher, you're a student, but I wonder if we can start at the beginning, because there's a lot of interesting things about your background. You used to do 800 pull-ups a day. You grew businesses, generated hundreds of millions of dollars for them. Let's take it back to the beginning, in your early 20s. What were you doing?
I'll give it to you in about a 5-minute little chunk. So I got married the first time. I've been married many times. The first time at 18. I had 2 children at 20, the needs of somebody 40, no formal education, and the world didn't care. And for a nanosecond, I was depressed. Then I realized the world doesn't care. They don't care if you're down. They don't care if you're up. They don't care what you do. So I commenced to try to find gainful employment. No one would give me a job that paid a salary. Everybody would give me opportunities to add value. Add value means grow more clients, expand their markets, find new distribution. So I defaulted to people who were crazy entrepreneurs, many of which saw life differently, but gave me the chance to sort of eat what you kill.
Okay.
And when you only eat when something performs, you learn very quickly what works and what doesn't,
Right.
and what works better. So I was very either easily bored or, what is it called when I can't do something? After 5 minutes, I get tired. So I guess I'm easily bored. So I went through a litany of different industries. I go through them long enough to sort of hit not perfection, but to see the person next to me was making 10% more. He'd been there 20 years. So I thought, I don't think there's a lot of future here. But I jumped from one industry to another industry to another. And after about 10, and sometimes concurrently, because it was all commissioned, so I could do 3 things concurrently, I realized that people in industry A don't have the slightest idea contextually what people in industry B or C or D do as far as strategy, as far as business model, psychology, how they reach the market. And I was able to borrow, giving the fast success concepts, approaches, strategies, philosophies from all kinds of unrelated industries, combine them into hybrids, introduce them into industries where everyone pretty much did the same thing in the same way. And all of a sudden, as a marketing genius, actually, it wasn't as much I as it was they. That most people limit, restrict, and they constrain so much what they can accomplish because they only use a very linear way of looking at it.
So can you give us an example of taking insights from one industry and how you applied them to a different industry.
Sure. I'll take one that's really cool. Almost everybody, even young people, will know the condo model where they'll fly you to Las Vegas or Cabo for 2 or 3 days, and they'll wine you and dine you, and all they want you to do is spend 90 minutes looking at a condo or at a timeshare, and they think about it. Well, we had a chiropractic company that was selling a very high-end, technology-driven chiropractic adjusting system. It was systems that were reading the spine, very cool, but they were 6 figures. And it was very hard to get a chiropractor who was into manual adjustment to even consider it. And they'd say, oh, come and visit. Nobody would do it. So we created the opposite. We said, we will pay to bring you to Philadelphia. We will put you up at the Hyatt. We will have a great 3-day experience. We will ask you to watch a demonstration, but meet other people who are using it. They will bring their patients, and then you judge for yourself. And we sold tens of millions of dollars by using a derivative of that concept.
That's amazing. And when you went to certain industries and tried to introduce these novel concepts, did they instantly recognize it?
No.
How did you get buy-in from these companies?
Oftentimes, there was 2 ways I did it. And I was naturally, you're not asking a question, we're going to answer a question you're not asking. This goes towards leadership. And leadership is something many young people wait to get appointed. But the truth of leadership, it has nothing to do with whether you're the CEO. You can assume it any time you want, in any form you want. So I would go to companies, I was performance-oriented, and I would say, look, my outcome is on the line. And I could figure out automatically how to do it with almost no cost, no risk. And so their downside was nothing. Frankly, and some of the most lucrative things I did, if I was passionate about it, if I tried to present it and they summarily rejected it, I would do a very interesting contextual, sort of a semantic change. I'd say, okay, fine. How about if I buy the rights to it and pay you? And they'd go, okay. So instead of me originally making 25% by getting them to say yes, I would get them to say yes in another way and make 75% and just do more of it myself. So it was an understanding inherently. I don't know if that's too abstract or makes sense.
But let's dig in. The performance model is something that is extremely powerful, but seemingly risky on the surface. Most people don't want to do it. The idea of working for purely commission is seen largely as a scam. This company can't even give me the respect to pay me. Why am I going to work for them? So I want to talk about performance and risk reversal, because it takes a profound respect of yourself that you say, I'm putting it all on the line. If it works, pay me, and pay me well. And if it doesn't work, don't pay me a cent. Can you talk about performance analysis and risk reversal when it comes to your own career?
Sure. So I stand for a lot of universal principles that I've been very blessed to give rebirth to. And I say rebirth because I'm not an original thinker. I'm a good synthesizer. Most people aren't. And so if you don't acknowledge that it came somewhere else, then you're basically stealing. But one of the things is risk reversal. And I realized basically anytime 2 people come together for any reason, business, romance, fraternity, anything, one side is always asking the other, consciously or subconsciously, explicitly, implicitly, knowingly, unknowingly, to take on more than all the risk. And all the risk can be very, very easily evident in situations. You want to get married, you might get a divorce and have kids and lose, the rest of your life. You want to buy a piece of software. It's not just the software. You can lose total control of your inventory. So I learned the concept of risk. And then I realized whoever assumes the risk, this is going to sound manipulative, but I was taught by mentors the concept of ethical advantage. Ethical advantage is different than manipulative advantage. Think about the scales of justice, the little model that justice was blind. Well, if everything you do in your life is designed to weight success in your behalf and move risk on the side of everyone else, you have inherent advantage going in. And I understood that from mentors who taught it to me. So my understanding is taking risk is only speculative if you're not aware of what the probability and outcome is. Now, when I did things, and everybody knows this, I made millions of dollars, and it's not arrogant, it's a documented record, but I did it because I was able to look at situations where I knew there was enormous underperformance. I knew that they were accepting a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the yield that a salesman could make, or an ad could make, or a lead could convert to, or that a buyer could be worth over time. And I would only take situations where it satisfied a self-imposed criteria, or I had 10 or 12 points that if it didn't satisfy 8, I wouldn't do it.
Can you give us a specific example where you took on the risk and it paid off handsomely, or one where you took on the risk and it didn't work out?
Sure. Absolutely. I had a client in I'm going to date myself, 70, that was in the gold brokerage business. They sold gold, physical gold, just bars and coins that you would deliver. And they had tepid relationships with financial newsletters. And they had like 3 or 4, and they had about 3,000 clients, and they were making a few $100,000. And I thought, how many more, because I had already historic experience with all the kinds of ways you could do it. And I thought, okay, if newsletters have access and affinity to the buyers, how many better ways can we use the access? So I went to them and I said, okay, you're making X. That's yours. I don't want any more. That's yours. We'll table it. If I can multiply that from the same sources or different ones, and it doesn't supplant, it augments, I want a quarter of what I make you.
Okay.
So they said, sure. Well, I knew that they weren't even coming close to maximizing anything they're doing. First thing I did, I went to all the newsletters and I changed the relationship. The newsletters already agreed to give them a percentage. They just were reactively sort of everyone's silently waiting to be led. But the key is they want to be led by somebody who knows what they're doing and has the best interest of the other side. So I knew what I was doing and had the best interest of the other side. I went to the newsletter publishers and I said, here's what we're going to do. First thing is we're not going to do intermittent, just occasional endorsement. When somebody becomes a new subscriber, you're going to send them a welcome kit and you're going to tell them all about gold investing. 4 times a year, we're going to underwrite a special newsletter interview you're going to do with our president that we'll do for you that is going to be basically all about gold investing. If you have high concentration of your subscriber base in high geographic locations, we will underwrite you promoting day-long seminars on hard asset gold, real estate investing. You can have all the money. We will basically underwrite it. When they did promotions for newsletters, most newsletter promotions were designed to break even or make a little money. When they stopped breaking even, most subscription-based newsletters, because they're only making $100, would stop doing it.
Yep.
Well, we were getting leads and going negative. You have to understand it's a little complicated so I don't want to get too sophisticated, but when a newsletter would stop mailing because they were losing $10, I would take over the responsibility of mailing. We would make their mailing piece better, and we would get half the profit on the upside. We would get our money back up to the loss, and we would get joint tenancy of the name. So I did things like that all the time. I went to all the providers of coins back before they legalized Krugerrands, Engelhart, Canadian Maple Leaf, Chinese Panda, and I showed them that we had ways to grow clients. I measured it, quantified it. I got them to give us millions of dollars to sell. I just did lots of things that most people wouldn't think about. Is that too?
Yes. No. So what I'm taking away from that is you go to the client or to the vendor, to the provider, and you say, look, you're already making this money. That's off the table. We're not even going to talk about that. But if I can make you more, give me a small piece of it, a fair number, and I'll take on all the risk myself. It sounds obvious, but so few people take that on. And I'm curious, why do you think we don't take on the risk on our own?
Well, I think there's 3 reasons. One is a self-esteem issue. We don't have faith in ourselves to do it. I've met so many people, and you know this, we've talked about it. I've done most of my work, I've been in 465 real industries, operating companies. People who already had to break through the barrier of opening a door, making a payroll, being there on a Monday morning. That's a big step. There's an enormous number of very, very admirable men and women, young, old, who want to be entrepreneurs. But it's intimidating.
Right.
They don't know how to do it. It's scary. And no one really teaches it. I don't want to name names, but I've spoken at some of the best entrepreneur schools, and it's so crassly theoretical and superficial. So first of all, they're scared even though they want it. Second of all, the ones that do it first experience prejudices you for life. If you go into something and you do it wrong and you execute wrong or you misperceive the opportunity or you look at it theoretically and it has a bad outcome, you recoil back and default towards security mode. So I was able, when I was young, and it's part of the book, the first one that you read, It says maximize what you're doing first before you multiply new things.
Yes.
So I always looked at everything they were doing. One of my great experiences early in the game was I worked for the Deming organization. Deming was the father of process improvement, optimization, but it goes down to analyzing how each element he did production, he did throughput, he did manufacturing, but you can translate it to revenue generation, and every element performs a certain way. Most elements underperform. I looked at situations where I knew, and the 3-way to grow a business model was really the guide. They are not maximizing the way they're bringing people in. They're not maximizing the message. I'll give you a couple of examples because I'm being very abstract. So I had another gold company one time that was running ads in the Wall Street Journal. And this is a classic story. It's in most of my books, but it goes towards the whole heart. Their ad said 2/3 bank financing on silver and gold. This was a time when gold was selling long ago for $300 an ounce. Silver was $6 an ounce. And their ads pulled enough that they made money, paid commissions, were able to, operate the business. But I looked at it and I thought, the headline, and this gets into marketing, which I don't want to talk about right now, but the headline does not denominate the most powerful outcome result for the intended buyer. And that's a very key part of marketing. It wants to denominate what's the biggest payout. Theirs didn't. 2/3 bank financing on silver or gold, it puts the onus on the person to try to
figure out
what the hell does that mean? What's the benefit?
Yeah.
So I made a deal with them that if I didn't spend a dime more on space, if I did nothing else, I could have a quarter of the increase.
All right.
Sure. So they're running an ad like this in the Wall Street Journal every day. I just changed the headline.
Yeah.
It took me 20 minutes, but I knew this from my training. My headline said, if gold is selling for $300 an ounce, send us just $100 an ounce, and we'll buy you all the gold you want.
Nice.
And it quintupled not just the quantity, because when you get in, I'm getting more esoteric than you want to be. When you get into lead generating, it's quality, convertibility, residual value.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too deep, but that one change made me $45,000 a month for almost a year until I had to change it again.
Yeah.
But we did one time, we did a furniture store, big one, about a $40 billion one, and we tested 33 different ways of meeting people at the front door. Mm-hmm. And we found one that tripled the number of conversions. No other expense. They were running $100,000 a month for newspaper. It was bringing about 1,000 people to the store. They were closing 150.
Yeah.
Until we tested this one and that one. One of them got them to close 450. But I knew those kind of things, and I knew how to, and a little of it's not intuitive, but it's experiential. But most people, when they speculate theoretically.
Yeah.
They don't speculate on factors that are higher. It's like probability, viability, and if you don't know that something has a higher probability of working than not, you shouldn't speculate on it.
So first of all, it's one thing to have all this wisdom and experience under your belt so you can go to a gold company and say, look, let me change this headline. I know it's going to work. Pay nothing, and if it works, pay me a quarter of what you get. But that takes 10, 20 years of understanding marketing. What about the first time when you go to your boss, you work at a company, and you have this idea, you're having a tough time getting buy-in, and you go and say, look, let me try this. Don't spend any more money on it. Don't assign anyone else. I'll keep doing what I'm doing for my job, but I'll do this once I go home. I'll do it for free.
And that's perfect.
What if you try it and it doesn't work because it's your first time and your theory was wrong or your understanding was wrong? I think a lot of people, as you said, would recoil and say, I'm never going to do that again. How do you think about that?
Well, I'm gonna usurp you in a bloodless coup, and I'm gonna give you a 5-minute dissertation on greatness, because greatness comes right back to this. And if they don't understand greatness, they won't understand the answer. So we're all programmed in our DNA to be great. Nobody wants to be average. No one wants to do a mediocre job. No one wants to accomplish a fraction of a fraction. We don't start our day or we can say to ourselves or our loved one or a significant other, I'm going to spend all week and I'm going to get a fraction of the outcome and I'm going to be mediocre. But 98% of all society are. Why? Because no one has ever helped them, first of all, understand what greatness looks like, what it feels like, how differently it's manifest, how it's received. If they get that, I'm going to go real fast and then you can ask me any question you want. If they get that far, most of them don't have a path to take to progressively get themselves there, and they want to basically pole vaulters and do it. They want to set the Olympic record the first time out instead of thinking in terms of the Panama Canal and locks. Third, if they get that far, the first time, this is the answer, the first time they start out, it is predictable human nature, they're going to be mediocre. Think about anybody. You're young. You don't have any kids. I got 7 that are older than you. So the first time a child tries to walk or talk or eat or poo-poo or ride a bicycle, what happens?
They fail.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't support them, re-encourage them, put them back on the horse, so it's almost like the statistical probabilities you are going to fail. It's almost this is an aside, but I laugh all the time when people say, well, I'm calling people and I'm just getting their voicemail when they're trying to either sell anything or make contact. And I go, well, statistically, what do you expect? Most people have no plan on getting a voicemail. They're shocked.
Yeah.
I have my strategies. I expect to get the voicemail. So I have so it's a way of critical thinking, and most people aren't very good critical thinkers.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is, like, being realistic is the most critical part of it. When you first start, expect to fail.
Yeah.
You're not going to be great. But if you walk in saying, as we say, it's not a failure, it's a test. We tested part 1, didn't work. Great, let's move on to the next strategy. Oh, that doesn't work, move on to the next one. And like you said, you ran 33 tests with that furniture company. If you had walked away with the first one saying, I'm just not good at this, that would have been the end of the game.
Well, here's what people don't realize, and I learned this very early in my life, and it was profound, that you and I don't have the right to make any decision ourselves unless we want mediocrity or a suboptimal outcome. We have the obligation, the privilege to ask the market. That means a test. You could test a lot of suppositions. I mean, I could get into variability, and you know more probably than I do, but I've been exposed to millions and billions and millions of dollars of variable tests. But most of these people don't realize you can test a lot of suppositions, and the downside is just your ego.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? If you look at, I mean, here's the irony. Let's look at the ultimate testers. Let's look at the venture capitalists. They're testing 25 companies to find one that might win, and they're happy with that. Why should you think that you're brighter than they are? Why should you think I'm going to hit it on the first? I mean, that's delusional, and it's beating yourself up unnecessarily. You celebrate tests because when I was a kid, and I'm a lot older than you, at Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever your religious belief, if you were a boy, they would give you a toy. It could have been manifest as a robot or an oversized ladybug, and it would hit a wall.
Yeah.
And we hit the wall, it would do a quarter turn to the right or the left. And I could point it in that direction, and give it enough time, it would go out that door. And if you realize that the key to everything is not trying to tell the market anything. Celebrate the fact that the market will tell you, you can try a lot of things, and there's not such a thing as a failure, because a failure gives you context for recalibrating. It's all a reframe of your mind. I hope I'm saying it clearly.
No, it took us years to internalize this model for ourselves. When we first started, we would create these grandiose theories and products, and they never worked the first time. But we were committed. We knew it was a great product. And so we said, we're going to take the time to figure out exactly where we went wrong. And we pulled it apart. We deconstructed it. And we listened to the market. And the market told us where we went wrong. Always. And when we learned to do that, when we actually planned for failure, everything went right. The revenues went up. Better yet, the client outcomes went better. Students came back and they loved it. So now I want to ask you a question. I don't know if you know this, but every time we talk, when we're on the phone, I have a notepad out and I'm writing the words you use. You take the rules that so many people trot out as best practices and you just throw them away. And I want to actually read some of the words that I wrote down from the last conversation we had.
Okay.
You told me you used words like vainglorious, beleaguered, nascent, insinuated myself. You said you bring sobriety and pragmatism to an intoxicated marketplace. I mean, who talks like that? But it is perfectly congruent with exactly what you're trying to convey. And so I would like to talk about knowing the rules so that you can break them. Let's take the context of someone who's in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They've been at a few different companies. They want to know the rules so that they can ultimately break them. How did you think about that early in your career?
Well, part of it, it's a great question that's never been asked. So when you ask interesting questions that have never been asked, just a knee-jerk is a disservice to your viewers. So let me try to reflectively answer it. I think there were many parts. One, I was always a great observer. I always would, at the end of the day, stop and say, what have I learned today about myself? What have I learned from somebody else? Well, I'll tell you a very, very different story. This might be very, very indicative. When I was first married and I didn't know what to do, I had a great big business card made up that big, and it said UC Sales. And I lived in Indianapolis. And it's a time when many of the companies there had receptionists because they didn't have voicemail then. And the receptionist would be behind a glass window, but the window wasn't that big. The window had a teeny tiny little crescent that you could put a business card through, but you couldn't really do anything else. So I would walk in, I'd just pick an industry. And I would walk in and say, hello, I'd like to speak to whoever the owner is. And they'd say, do you have an appointment? Of course I did. And I'm making a point, so I'm not trying to be tangential. And they'd say, well, who are you with? And I'd look, and I'd say, no one. And they'd look bizarre, and they'd say, do you have a card? And I'd say, yes. And I'd try to get this card in this little door. And they would look at me, and I would go like that, and they would take the card back, and it never failed to get me an interview. And then I would sit and ask questions. And I had people that would allow me to sit in their offices for hours watching them do business because I was so incongruent with their model. But I would ask a myriad of questions. I would try to figure a way I could add value. Add value is the key, not take value, not what they can do for me, what I could figure out to do for them. If I couldn't add value without being covert or surreptitious, I now could go, figuratively speaking, down the street and talk to their competitor. And I had the knowledge, I had the understanding, I had the context. But I think that the rules are a very, not amorphous, but it's a very dynamic concept. I think that there's three things. In life, it's got to be ethical, equitable, legal. You cannot change legal, although some attorneys will give you interesting interpretations. Ethical and equitable are pretty subjective. So what I always tried to do was figure out, is the way this business or this industry is operating makes sense to me? I'm a mad scientist, but I am actually very super logical. Most of the time, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because it didn't, because I mean, there's a story I'll tell. Very simple story, but it's indicative for everyone to watch. Old. Man gets married, very lovely woman. Every year they go to the mother's house for Christmas. You know the story?
No.
Every day at Christmas, every Christmas day, the wife and the mother are making a roast. And they start by taking this big roast, and they lop off a little piece on this side and this side of the raw roast before they put it in a pan and bake it. First year, the man goes, it's bizarre, must be some Epicurean reason. Next year, he says, I guess be. After 3 years, he finally, after 3 years, musters up the energy to ask his wife, why in the heck do you lop off the little ends of this roast? This is an old story. And she goes, because my mom did it. Mom's there. Why did you do it? Well, my mother did it. Turns out, Grandma's sitting 88, sitting rocking in the corner. They go, Grandma, why in the world did you teach Mom and who taught me to lop off both sides? She goes, very simple. When we moved here from the old country, we had a teeny tiny apartment with an even teenier tiny oven, and you couldn't even buy a roast that would fit in it.
All right.
But because that's what they did, everyone did it. And that's sort of a metaphoric example of linear, reactive, convergent thinking. I was lucky. Today it's called divergent thinking. But back then, I called it basically funnel vision. But I would look at things and say, this doesn't make sense. If it didn't make sense, I would usurp authority. But remember, I was very rarely getting paid a salary.
Right. So it's hard to argue when they're really, you've taken away all their risk. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is not trying to be arrogant, but when I would work in the gold business, this was hilarious. I would get a client, I would build them up, and we'd take a position, like a stock market. You could be premium, you could be boutique, you could be Charles Schwab. Well, I would create a mass market, and we did billions of dollars. And I kept saying to my client, I think you should now have a boutique, and I think we should have a Charles Schwab, because they're going to be there. Why don't we compete with ourselves? Not going to do that. And I did it for 5 years, and finally I said, you're not paying me a salary. I'm paying you, really, because I'm giving you basically the majority of the profits I make you, so I'm going to go and find competitive clients. And I created a boutique client, and and they all made billions of dollars.